Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and my guest is going to be Trevor Quickshot Henry, who obviously you might know as once upon a time maybe the face of the LEC or European League of Legends. But the place I want to start, understandably, Quickshot, is the beginning. We're just going to start at the beginning. Now, I've often seen actually in many interviews, AMAs, even though you actually did a pretty good Riot profile on you many years ago, they often tell the story of like where you come from. But there's actually a detail I saw in the Riot one I never normally saw in the other ones. Normally the story goes, I come from South Africa, I was playing COD, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Somehow I'm playing League in Europe. But you told an interesting thing there, which is because of your dad, you were in South Africa, then you're in Northern Ireland. Like, mate, if you're going to pick somewhere to start an esports, I thought I had a pretty bad one in the northeast of England, mate, where there's nothing. Like, if people don't know, there's not even any sort of, like, the internet's not very good in these countries at the time you were there. And there's no scene. No. There's no, like, esports tournaments or, I don't even know if there'd be LAN cafes here. What was it like in that sense? What was becoming a gamer in this world like?
I mean, honestly, I had no frame of reference, so it was just tiny. First of all, it's a fucking pleasure to chat. Okay. I took a bit of a year to chill, and it's actually pretty interesting to me that you've asked this question now and not literally 6 months or 12 months ago, because after leaving Riot and taking some time off, I did a lot of therapy last year, Duncan.
Okay.
And I've reflected a lot. So there's two big threads. The first one is my dad, Northern Irish, my mother, Welsh. They met in Pretoria in South Africa, which is the capital. Okay.
If people don't know, there are actually a lot of people, not just from England, who were in South Africa, right? So that's where the heritage is made up of.
Loads. Exactly. Because, look, under the apartheid government, the British government, who they've pushed the Dutch colonizers out, they paid laborers to go over there.
Oh, wow, right.
So I actually have an Irish passport, I have a South African passport, and I have a British passport. Right. And that's because of Northern Ireland. You'll know some of the politics there and whatnot, and making reparations for the Troubles. But when I reflect a little bit on it, growing up in South Africa was shit. It's just end of story.
Fair enough.
Like, I don't know how many people you know who've been mugged, have had their house broken into,
right.
have had their car broken, hijacked and broken into, and that's happened multiple times, literally my entire family. It's just one of the shit things about living in South Africa, and I never really acknowledged it, never really addressed it, and never really understood kind of just how much it kind of fucks you up a little bit, you know?
Right.
And it's one of the things that's like quite heavy. So we'll get that out of the way, because that's definitely something that I'm starting to unpack. But what I will say is, I got into gaming at like 12 or 13. And one of the things I've always loved about how you brand yourself and how you talk about yourself online, Duncan, is just like the historian of esports.
Yeah. And
you've got a phenomenal, much better memory and much better recall than I do. But I've been watching since 99. Like, I had the opportunity to meet Jason Lake from Complexity recently, and I was watching him when his Counter-Strike team was flying to China in the early 2000s. Like, those are show matches and events that there's not many people in the industry that are even aware of. And like, I grew up, got my first PC at 12, 13, so that's 99, 2000. Started playing a less than legal version of Warcraft 3 online, because there was no local server. So you had to crack it. There was a cracked hosted server playing Warcraft 3 and got into Battlefield 2, got into Call of Duty 4. And if you want to dive deeper, we will. But then from there, those scenes introduced me to esports. And I watched everything, like ESWC, WCG, CPL, CGS, OGN. Like, these are all tournament names that will immediately be recognizable to like yourself, right? But,
and there wasn't a tournament every month back then, mate. It was a big deal when the tournament happened. Yeah, but a lot of us watched other games. Yeah, of course.
Huge. Yeah. And like, you know, I mean, I presume you'll remember CPL, Fatality, and the Painkiller circuit.
Yeah.
And regardless how you feel about that circuit and him, because it was a shit show. But I actually had the pleasure of playing against Fatality in a 1v1 at one of the biggest LANs in South Africa. I watched him do a bunch of show matches.
Rageland for Quake 4, right?
Yes,
yeah, I remember.
Yes, correct. So he was doing a tour with Creative. They just released his gaming mouse.
Exactly.
And I watched all the show matches on the Friday, all the show matches on the Saturday, and then I was on the Sunday one. I made the mistake of killing him with the railgun equivalent. It was a state gun and Painkiller. All I did was study his pathing, literally straight up.
Right.
And effectively, I just spawn camped. I spawned. I made a
against Fatality.
I managed to get the one shot, and it was the worst mistake I could have ever done, because he made me kill myself twice. So I was the only person to end the weekend with a -1 scoreline.
Even though you probably one of the few people to kill him.
Exactly. But it's like that's kind of like the quick overview of what it's like. But like, in terms of the scene, it's tiny. Call of Duty 4 was one of the biggest games. You had dedicated servers, and I'm talking about 30 to 50 competitive teams over a 12-month circuit. And that lasted for about 4 years. And about the same for like Counter-Strike Source. Source was really, really big in South Africa at the time. It's really, really small, man. It's just small scene, small community. So everybody knows everybody. There's some of the guys I played against that I still talk to this day.
Even though, like every major franchise, people from the old school are always going to think the first game's the best, I have heard all the same that people who played COD 4 think that was like a zenith point of the series, and actually after that it became iterative and it was a game a year and all. So a lot of people think this era, like the sort of COD 4 Pro mod, these were the glory days. People think, was it a good game? Was it one of your favorites?
I mean, it was. It also was the game I was probably the best at. So
right.
I've got a warped perspective on it.
Right.
And also, I'm not going to be one of these COD 4 diehard defenders. We tried to make it fucking Counter-Strike, but fast.
Right.
Like,
okay.
I'm not being funny, but like, if you actually go look at Pro Mod and you break it down, more than half of the guns were limited. More than half of the like sights were changed. And it's just, if Quake and Counter-Strike could have a baby, it was Call of Duty 4. So it scratched an itch that was a little bit different.
Right.
I still don't think that there's been a tac shooter.
The reason you say Quake, by the way, is because this actually had like movement was a big part of that game. Actually, maybe people aren't aware of that, right?
Huge. I mean, look, I also I grew up on Quake 3, CPMA, and Call of Duty 4. Those were my two games. So I was more of a twitch shooter. I really liked the duel in 1v1s. I really liked timing and armor, stuff like that. In Call of Duty, you had your slide mechanics, you had your movement. You literally had to do a version of strafe jumping like you would get in Quake 3, but it wasn't the same degree. What League of Legends is to Dota, Call of Duty is to Quake.
Yeah, that's not bad.
So it's just a kind of simplification. It speeds it up. But then, of course, Pro Mod is what made it big. It also was the last big Call of Duty on PC. I think a lot of the diehards as well. Once it got big on console, and once controller took over from keyboard and mouse, I think, just to be fair, I think some of the beauty and some of the flair and the flick shots and the aim just got killed by aim assist.
An interesting detail I saw in the Riot profile about you is actually this is a classic gamer sort of theme, you could say, which I'll give you an example. Because I came from Quake, actually, even though I played Counter-Strike from Beta 1, the story is I only ever played it because when I went to LANs and you would have general casuals come who played a little bit of Quake, they get bored of getting owned by you after like 2 days, mate. So they just go like, can we play something else so I have a chance? So what we would do is play every mod that was out there because that way we're all starting fresh. Look, in 2 days I'm still going to be better than them. But for the first day, I have to, what the fuck's Counter-Strike? The guns are all, and I used to think this is fucking shit. And then the joke goes, and then 25 years later, here I am, right? I saw that you actually did this. People are going to think you must be the biggest fan ever of League. Maybe you're a daughter. You said that when your brother introduced you to this game, you were like, this sounds crap, basically. Like, what is this? And then obviously the joke is, here you are today. What was that? What was the start of League like?
I mean, super simple. League of Legends was my easy game that I used when I gave up on competitive. Like, when I stopped playing competitively, I did quick timeline here. So I got invited to join a gaming clan in South Africa called Big Fat Bastards. And the whole joke was we get pissed, we play tournaments hungover, and it's about socializing and being just a little bit sweaty. Not so sweaty that it ruins the drinking, but just sweaty enough that semifinals is the goal. And I ran that clan from 16 years old till 22. I left South Africa. And when I left the clan and I left the gaming side behind me, I also had grown this clan to be multiple games. We had Battlefield 2, Battlefield 2142, Call of Duty 4. We tried Counter-Strike and then immediately went, this shit's too hard, gave up and just went straight back to Call of Duty. I had a second Call of Duty team. My brother was like, okay, he stopped playing. He said, try this thing out. I literally laughed at it. I said, any game that's called LOL's got to be shit. But when I left South Africa in 2010, which is now I'm 22, turning 23, I started looking for work. I got a job in Berlin. The game had just dropped 2010. I just started playing 2011. And that was the time that I actually moved to Berlin. I moved to Berlin on a shitty community manager and events coordinator job for an online browser game company called Just a Game. And they ran a browser-based military sim that was Civilization meets Command & Conquer. Okay. And it was shit. it sucked. Like, if there weren't whales in the game, I wouldn't have had a job. But during that time frame, that's when I started playing League of Legends. And then I got really into it and I got really hooked. And I couldn't put the game down. I'd never played a MOBA. All I'd ever known is FPS. If it wasn't FPS, I didn't play it. Seriously, like that was, nothing else kept my attention. And that was the first time that I really started to sink my teeth into it and really dive into the game. I have this vivid memory of meeting Fantasy, who was a Dignitas Call of Duty player at Antwerp Esports Festival. Actually, Richard Lewis was at that event. It was the first time I met him as well. And I saw him playing an early beta or alpha of League of Legends, and I chewed him out. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? How are you playing this game? Sure. Why are you not playing Call of Duty?
Sure.
And then, fast forward a few years, he's actually been in my DMs to be like, yeah.
Oh, right. He got you back. Right. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, along those lines, two things. One, similar. By the way, loads of people have this story. Richard Lewis has a great story. When Deman was at a LAN, might be like an iSeries or something, Deman rocked up with like the free League of Legends shirt. And Richard Lewis was like, what are you doing playing that game? That'll never take off. Another one, listen, he tells that story himself. It's all those classic stories, isn't it? Right, here's the question for you then, which is another thing I've always found interesting is a lot of people don't know until a game becomes huge. And by the way, esports was so niche back then. Even, I have to explain to people, even if you played Counter-Strike or Quake back in the day, you might never have even seen a match. You might not even know what CPL was. You might vaguely know there's lands in your area and someone's better than you, or you can play 1v1. So I always tell people, actually, everyone who is into esports has something a little bit different. Like, what made you want to know, like, for example, who the best teams are, or who's good, or if there's an esports side to League of Legends?
I mean, the thing is, it's actually the Counter-Strike scene and the StarCraft scene that got that imbued that into me. So when I got invited to play Battlefield 2, there may be a chance that some of these guys will watch this, but Chaos AD Pumpkinhead, Chuckstar, U2M, Fatso Raz Dingbat. These are the nicknames of the middle-aged men that invited me into their squad in Battlefield 2 when I was 14 or 15 years old and went, listen, mate, you're pretty fucking good with this G36. Do you want to join? That introduced me to like competitive Battlefield 2. And then my brain just went, what is this? So this is, early 2000s, right? Early to mid 2000s. By this point, Counter-Strike in terms of international tournaments and StarCraft are kind of established if you know where to look. And once I started to learn specifically about the Counter-Strike circuit, I think back then it was ESWC and WCG. I think that was the time frame for them. That introduced me to more games. And then when Call of Duty came out, I was like, okay, cool. Now I know where to learn. I started to look for like the Tech 9 forums.
Right.
I started to seek out that information. And it's actually where I started to watch like Joe Miller and Deman. One of my favorite commentators when I was growing up was Tosspot. He didn't really do a huge number of events, but he just had...
He could do any game, couldn't he? He could just do any game.
One of the most unique voices, seriously. And also, I didn't realize until many years later, but I ended up accidentally modeling some of my energy after Tosspot because I think Tosspot was overwhelmingly positive a lot of the time, So I sought out all this information. I sought out all of these games. So by time 2010, 2011 drops, frankly, I am a pro at knowing where the esports scenes are, which tournaments are good. Like when the Cyber Athlete Professional League with fucking Ass Driller or whatever the goddamn name was of the CEO, the games that they put in there, when I think it was CGS changed the format for Counter-Strike and they changed it, from MR15. I could tell as a mid-20-something-year-old with no esports like professional experience that those were bad decisions. Right? When I see Painkiller going into a circuit instead of Quake, my brain tells me, okay, money's been used for this. The format's not the same. This is a publisher thing. It's not really, it doesn't have the competitive community. It doesn't have this. Right. So League of Legends comes out and I don't look at it as anything other than it's just the game that I'm playing and I'm having fun with it. And I've got a pretty strong case of ADHD and an unhealthy competitive spirit. So throughout all of 2011, all I do is work for 8 hours in the office and then play League for 6 to 8 hours at night every day. I was single. I had just moved to Berlin. It's pretty shit weather most of the time. I didn't know the city. All I did was play the game. towards the end of the year, what actually got me into League and then got me into this next phase of my life was that I got chewed out by my boss. I've told the story a couple times in interviews, but my boss yelled at me. On my second monitor, I always had a League of Legends tournament on. In 2011, there was a lot. There was online tournaments. Teams were organizing stuff. Like, it was kind of let's say the Counter-Strike era, 2013, 2011, and 2012 of independent tournaments all around the world, different hosts, different organizers. And when my boss chewed me out, another lady came over to me at lunch and said, "So how much League of Legends do you know?" And I was like, "Well, an unhealthy amount." And she says, "My boyfriend happens to run a gaming company here in Berlin. Would you mind talking to, because he wants to get involved in League of Legends." This is late 2011. As it turns out, this was the girlfriend of the CEO of Freaks for You Gaming, who at the time were running Join Dota. I think it was Join Dota, Toby One's thing, which was one of the biggest at the time. This is pre-drama. Okay?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And he and I got chatting, and he was kind of the guy that was like, "Hey, Trevor, you talk a lot of shit. Have you considered commentary?" And then 2012 was when I started my move towards, let's say, professional league. But 2011, it was just, there was nothing else. It was my crack, shall you say. I couldn't get enough league.
You've told along the lines of that, where there's like happenstance and you just have to sort of grab the opportunity when it comes, whether you know what it means. You've also told the story that basically, if it wasn't for like meeting Deman and him just for real, just having like sort of, you could take this guy, I'm busy, I have to do another event. If this doesn't happen, like you wouldn't be sat here right now, right?
Thorin, it's even better than not just meeting him, right? I'd not met him. In 2012, you've set me up very well. I appreciate that. In 2012, I started working for Freaks for You. I was doing some community work, and basically I was their PA for sponsorships and partnerships. I joined them as my 9 to 5 was liaising with the other brands that they were working with. At the time, it included like Zotac, Razer, MSI. And any of their gaming team deliverables that need to be checked, any of the applications that need to be forwarded, like I was the person that processed that. Then from 6 until 9, I would be allowed to use their studios to stream. So every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, I got on air, and every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, I advertised. I knew nobody was going to know my name. I knew nobody was going to recognize my nickname. Nobody knew who the fuck I was. So all I did is say, "Hey, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, it's that South African guy, that South African guy, that South African guy. I've got a different voice. I've got a different accent. I've got a country that a lot of people don't know about." And I wore a Star Wars t-shirt every single day. It got noticed. It got noticed to the point that after a couple of months, I did not wear a Star Wars t-shirt on broadcast. And somebody said, "That South African guy is not wearing a Star Wars t-shirt." This is what a League of Legends subreddit thread was back in 2012.
Right.
But importantly, those were the events that I was commentating. And I got one very, very big break, is that Deman and Panky at the time were unable to do a 4PL online qualifier. And whatever things, I think they had an I-Series or something to go to.
Right.
Like they had another event. And they said to Deman, "Who can you recommend?" He said, "Well, listen, that South African guy's doing some pretty good shit and he's been consistent. Go check him out." I didn't know.
Oh, wow, you didn't even know him?
That Deman had sent him my way until months later. And it didn't take that long because my come up was pretty meteoric. I was in the right place at the right time. I had a unique selling point in a couple of different ways. And I did my first ever Go for LOL broadcast around March of 2012. I got this 4PL opportunity, and the reason I got so lucky is Gambit got eliminated in the semifinals, where Diamond Prox was running like a jungle Shyvana for like the first fucking time ever.
Right.
And they lost the game, and it was huge. It was a number one.
Oh, so that made it like the top thread classic, right?
Yes.
Right.
So I just got lucky that like a pre-tournament favorite got knocked out in the semifinals in a gig that happened to get offered to me. That then led to me being asked to shoutcast the MLG Summer Arena in August.
Fucking hell. Okay.
Yes.
How'd you go off? That's 0 to 60, isn't it? What the fuck?
Right. So that jumped to MLG Summer Arena in August. That then got me Dreamhack in November. Dreamhack Winter with myself and Panky commentating Fnatic in 2012, a year and a half after they'd won their fucking championship. And I joined Riot in January. So it was literally 9 months from my very first broadcast to the next. So on one hand, it was literally the perfect storm of circumstances. On the other hand, I was incredibly deliberate. I was incredibly specific. I knew that if I was broadcasting, hey, I stepped on people's toes. Deman and Joe were the shitness back then. They didn't use a single spell name. It's not rocket science. I literally just studied the game so that I could do something nobody else did. It got me noticed. And then like they got called out for it. And it was like, hey, if this fucking random South African can do this on Thursdays for Go for LOL, why can't the pros? I'm incredibly proud of that year, but it also is something where it's like, I was lucky and I had the right skills and I was in the right headset. So it all came together quite magically.
When you say that about your accent, this is something I actually want to make a point, because I'm sure a lot of people who are like wannabe commentators, broadcast talent, watch interviews like this and they think, oh, maybe I'll pick up a thing or two. And I have to say, one of the biggest sort of misunderstandings of the industry I've found from newer people is they always think if they don't have like a perfect accent, like American accent, they think it's going to not work. I've even, believe it or not, I won't go into what she said, but I one time had a conversation like this with Law, where all I can tell you is early on she was thinking like, oh, they're going to think I talk like this, and what? Yes. And I was telling her, no, you have to understand, once they love you, that's going to make you unique. There's not going to be anyone with that accent. Like, no one else is even talking who does French. They do the French broadcast. So I feel like, isn't it iconic, the Quickshot voice and accent?
We live in fucking Europe.
Sure.
Accents are fucking real. Yes. Okay. Like there is an argument to be made that in the annals of the best commentated duos for League of Legends, Quickshot and Deficio will be in the top 5.
Sure.
I think that is fair to say. A South African and a Dane, right? And I've got a shit, weak, soft South African accent. I've lost a lot of the nuance.
Yeah.
It's closer to probably British. I even have some American in there, but like, just if you stop and you think about that for a second, if the accent was the most important, then that's a pretty interesting one. And you either are polarized, right? I used it to my advantage because I do, especially in 2012, 2013, when Elise was popular, Cocoon, there are some words that do sound funny, right? I got, I'm not going to say flamed, that's a bit childish, but like there were some hater groups that would try to say, let's do Quickshot bingo, let's make fun of him and stuff. I ended up claiming some of that shit and turning it around. Use what you have. And I think also it's important to be comfortable with your voice. So I've had that same conversation with Law. I've had that same conversation with a lot of on-air talent in EU, and specifically with Martin, specifically with Deficio. That man himself will tell you that he speaks with a potato in his mouth. But goddamn, the stuff that comes out past that potato is so much more important than the potato. So, it's about the content. It's about knowing what you're saying, knowing what you're doing. And also, if you have something, use it. If you have a French accent, make sure you use it. Connect it to something. I think it's fair to say a lot of people know I'm South African. Not many people will know my parents are British.
No.
But that's by design, so...
Since you said you got the gig at MLG Summer Arena, if people don't know, one, that was in like the actual MLG offices in New York, so that's ridiculous already to go there. And then two, this is actually, if people don't know, a piece of trivia, the first tournament where Koreans went to the West and clapped everyone. That was the Zubu Players one. So give me some thoughts on this experience. It was supposed to be wild going to New York.
Oh my God. I never normally tell this side like in adverts, fuck's sakes, in interviews, but I was supposed to be flying out on the Thursday. We did rehearsals Friday, and then the show was like Saturday, Sunday, if I recall. But, or it might have been fly Wednesday, rehearsals Thursday, show Friday. That was what it was. A baggage handler actually hit the engine on the way out from Berlin. My flight got canceled to the next day. And when I landed, I ended up missing all of rehearsal. And with the time zone difference, I had to go straight to studio.
With no rest whatsoever.
Yes, like for the very first time I landed, I had never traveled internationally to the US before. I was commentating with Deman for the first time ever, and bearing in mind that for me at this time, Deman was the voice of Call of Duty 4. Like, a lot of people will know him for League. I think it meant more the recognition he had in Call of Duty because of the size of the how much smaller, how much more intimate everything was.
Right.
And I probably watched every single game he commentated. Also, Monty was working that event. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, what's the translator from LCK? He was a fan. Anyways, there's a whole number of people and things that happened at that event.
Oh, it was Chobra.
Chobra, yes. Chobra.
This was his first event. Yeah, the one with the Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper,
ridiculous one in it, yeah.
Chobra was camping outside, trying to enter a Dr. Pepper tournament. We had to walk past him awkwardly. Like, we were on the show, and he was just this weird fan. And they ended up doing translating, and then literally ended up like growing and becoming a huge professional. But it was terrifying. I think when I worked the event, something I'm very fortunate for and I'm very happy about is I have mainstream traditional business experience, because straight out of university, I got a job, an 18-month contract at a national retailer for PC parts. Like if in the UK, think PC World. If you're in Europe, think Saturn or MediaMarkt. I went straight to the head office and I launched a gaming brand focused on selling, bespoke graphics cards, gaming spec CPUs, because these were moms and pops office stores. I have business experience. I grew up in a household with parents that way. So those skills are partially and probably a large part of why I was able to transition like my love for esports and my ability to talk shit into actual work, because I very clearly remember Chris Puckett, I will owe a debt of service to for a very long time. He took a gamble on me. He was the guy that reached out on behalf of MLG. He was the dude that said, look, I've seen 4PL. I've seen the streams that you're doing. We need a host. I don't know how many names they went down. I don't know where I was on the call sheet list, and I don't give a shit. But I know that Chris was the guy that called me and said, look, we want you to come out. We want you to work with Deman. We want you to work with Optimus Tom. Monty's going to be there as well. And it's going to be a small, tight crew. It's going to be a pretty tight show. What do you think? Getting to just work side by side with some of the people that would go on to make fantastic careers for the entire time. My favorite interview of Monty's ever happened from that event.
The one that doesn't exist on the internet. He's glad.
He's so traumatized.
Yes,
he hates bringing up Dyrus's pillow. And I love to think back to it. But it was great. I got to see Azubu Blaze. I got to see Curse at the time. It was the first time I got to meet I Will Dominate as well. Got to interact with some of the guys, and TSM, of course, they were there too. Just fantastic. But also really, really good, because my very first big giant event was this very small, very bespoke 4-team thing. So I got to learn so many important skills that when I would continue on and eventually get to Riot, I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't the new kid on the block. I was like, I've done MLG. I proved it. I did this shit in 6 months from my first broadcast. Like, I'm fucking here to do something.
Being as Monty now has his own sort of like legit status as an elder statesman in the industry. And now, by the way, he's always dreamed of this. Now he's in the ivory tower, like the academic he thinks of himself as, What people won't know is this Quickshot. I met Monty the year after this. I remember MonteCristo, who was quite fresh-faced to esports and was coming out of like, hey, I did some replays for Warcraft 3. It's like, who gives a fuck about what are you talking about? And I remember when he had the shaved head and he was just out of doing all the law stuff. Who was young Monty? Because he's quite different, right?
Honestly, this is a tough one, because I think Monty and I at MLG, I think we came in with the same energy, right? I think we came in as very determined, very motivated, but also very self-assured individuals.
Okay.
In a space where I think it is fair to say a lot of our peers, a lot of other professionals, a lot of the gamers, the players themselves, lack some level of social skills, lack some levels of professional awareness, lack business acumen. There's a general lack of inexperience, right? Because it is a young industry. Even today, 20 years on, it's just kids replacing kids. So I very clearly remember standing in a room, speaking to Christopher, not Monty, speaking to Christopher, and me speaking to an adult.
Oh, okay.
And and what I mean by that is I could also see behind his eyes, he was driven. When the producer said to him, we want you to do this Dyrus interview, he so badly did not want to do it, but understood in this show, in this event, with my current status, like, I've got to do this thing. And he made the best of it that he could, right? But there's that look in your eye, that look of like, one day I'm going to be able to say, fuck you, right. I'm not doing this. But I have never, ever, ever had anything but respect for back then Christopher and now MonteCristo as he's grown up, because I think he's always been living in his ivory tower, Now he's just built it around him.
Right.
If you know,
Right.
you know. And I also I would feel confident in saying that from that time onwards as well. It's like you can almost just see who's gonna be somewhere in 5 years, or who's gonna do something with their time. The exact same reason that we gave Chobra a shot at translating on a live show, who was literally just effectively stalking. Like, honestly, he camped outside the office, but the way he engaged, the way he chatted, it's that same kind of thing where it's like there was a hunger, there was a fire, there was a professionalism, and there was a youthful energy that was like, I'm gonna get to a point one day where you can't make me interview a pillar.
Right, since you referenced two of the first events you got was MLG Summer Arena and Dreamhack Winter over in Europe, right? Little piece of trivia for everyone, because there's going to be another insane, surreal connection. So the team that no one remembers at MLG Summer featured Rekkles. Then Dreamhack Winter was Rekkles' first tournament in Fnatic. So Rekkles, essentially, by the way, is like the main character of, I mean, maybe Caps now, but at the time was the main character of League of Legends for many years. He was the face of the league. So it's kind of wild you'd even have that connection early on, and you see his growth, right?
It really was, and I didn't understand it. I didn't appreciate it either.
Right.
League of Legends for me was my fun game, right? It was my social game, and I'm shit at this game. Like, seriously. I've never gone above Gold 1. I've never tried much harder.
I actually think there's something about people's brains, mate, because what's weird is I won't brag. Like, I'll never say I was pro in CS, but I was pretty good. Like, I could play Pogs with pros and I've never ever been able to play League, mate. I'm just shit. I just play the one kind. So I think people's brains for different games, you know what I mean?
I 100% agree. I have hand-eye coordination, I have reaction speed, I understand angles, I understand Quake. Like, if I need to do the timing on my ammo, armor, and health, and I have to keep my momentum, like there's a rhythm to it. So I suck at League.
Right.
So when I got to see the Bacon Lovers Are Crazy Cool Team Black at MLG, I can't remember who was invited that couldn't make it, but basically they had to do a mixed team because, again, it was a bit of a Mickey Mouse tournament. So, you know, a mixed team gets there. Watching Fnatic, I didn't appreciate at the time just how good he was and what it was going to mean for the scene, right? I think I was still quite ignorant. I was still quite dumb. And I wasn't yet fully absorbed. I mean, I've been commentating for 4 to 5 months by the time I got to meet him. And by that point, I don't think the IPL 5 had happened. I think that was the end of 2012.
That was the end of the year, yeah. Very end.
It was the end of the year. And that was where I knew it, right? Because I got to see him, and then IPL 5 happens, and then I go, fuck, I wish I'd spent more time talking to him. Right? So then that kind of realization sinks in. But take my word for it, I learned from that mistake, because by the end of 2012, something that I've never said publicly and never shared, throughout the course of 2012, I was obviously doing this broadcast for Freaks for You, but I wanted to be a full-time broadcaster. I wasn't getting paid for any of these things. This was all my own, free time. I wanted to try and make a thing of it. So I was speaking to Own 3D, the broadcasting platform. I was speaking to Eclipsia. I was speaking to Fnatic. And actually, it was because of IPL and because of Dreamhack, I was actually speaking to Fnatic management about maybe being an in-house streamer, an in-house commentator for them. Because at that time, there was still the possibility that the League of Legends ecosystem was going to be run by third parties, that it was going to be tournaments, that it was going to be an open market, open field. Ultimately, Riot came in and said, fuck you, we're going to run EU LCS. And then I was very fortunate to be able to get an interview and actually land the job there. But I was looking at these other orgs, these other avenues where I could have done broadcast.
You've told the story many times. You referenced it here of the gimmick was you said the spell names. Now, the joke is Quickshot. I won't lie to you, mate. I'm the guy who I don't care about the law in any game. Like, don't tell me about Noxia. The joke is, even if you say the spell name, I do think he hit the queue. I'm just that type of gamer, mate. I'm really old school in that sense. So I will say, I was actually surprised. Look, I'll give you another great take. You want like a Richard Lewis to Deman level 1? When they brought out skins in CSGO, I was like, what a fucking waste. Who would put a skin on? Buy the shit, you idiot. You just play with it. It doesn't even change the gun. It's cosmetic. That'll never take off. Joke being it made the game 100 times bigger. And then I became a fucking broadcast talent because of the skin. So you can, some of us don't see certain things that are coming on the horizon. So when you did the spell name thing, I actually remember thinking like, is anyone going to vibe with this? Like, who knows all the spell names? Like, it's actually, it can sometimes be more confusing. Like, is that the ult layers? But here's the thing. First of all, it did instantly make you, in a way, iconic. Like, no one else did it. And actually, here's the thing. I know they admit it, but I can tell you, I noticed immediately, though, I used to listen to Joe and Deman do League. I noticed immediately, all of a sudden, it wasn't that Misfortune did the ult. It was like, oh, they did the bullet time, the curse of the sad moment. All of a sudden, they all had to do it. Every bloody person. That's pretty cool to have that sort of, like, even though you just gambled on it, it paid off, mate.
Listen, it was deliberate. I needed to find something that stood out. I didn't think in 2012, I didn't think that just my accent was enough. But also, I'm not fucking stupid, Thorin. And I've said this and I've admitted this to so many. When I started at Riot in 2013 and 2014, I had to do color commentary. And I use those air quotes with bold and underlined, right? Okay. I applied. I told them I needed to do play-by-play. I'm a play-by-play commentator. I'm a host. I'm a lead voice. I'm the energy guy. But they had Deman and Joe, so it was never going to happen. Now, I knew looking ahead. I knew looking at the industry. I'm not smart enough to compete with the likes of Jat, the likes of at the time, even Jason Kaplan was on the analyst circuit, and the pro players that were around, right? I'm definitely not good enough to understand this game. So how can I stand out? What can I do differently? So I thought about my tone. I thought about my energy. The spell names, it's more than just a gimmick in my head. You can make a moment more powerful because those words are just better.
Right.
Every single fucking game has an ult. Every single game. He hits the ult. If you're a play-by-play guy and you want to get energy, you don't even stand out between different games by doing that. This is the one thing that was unique. So yes, it was 100% gimmicky, but also it was with intent. And if you, especially back then in 2012, 2013, 2014, Lissandra, Frozen Tomb. Jesus Christ, I screamed.
Tomb, another one, another great South African Tomb. I love it.
See what I mean, right?
Perfect, yeah.
So I also then looked into the spell names and I'm like, great, what are the ones that are popular? Where will I make sure I overemphasize it? I don't give a shit if 10 to 20 to 30% of the audience hates my accent and thinks they fucking know who I am. Right. and that was one of the main goals, but it's something I will wear as a badge of honor for my entire professional career, that I individually was the catalyst for change. I believe it would have happened at some point personally. I'm just glad that I was the first one to really get the ball rolling. And yeah, I think it is fair to say that I had a pretty significant impact on that change in League of Legends commentary.
One thing you nailed there is there are a certain sort of almost type of people that are in broadcast work who have, as you say, that like self-assuredness or the idea that like I'm going to get there even if I'm not there yet. And I will say that's another thing, by the way, that will probably shock people, is if they only knew. I mean, pretty sweet. I believe even on their social media, if you ever watch her Instagram, I believe talks all the time about having imposter syndrome sometimes. By the way, when she goes to CS events, she gets it all over again. Like, fuck, is this my game? Am I just here because I'm big in League? A lot of people, some of the best talent ever have this imposter syndrome. But I have to say, Quickshot, I actually vibe with you, mate, because I've never had it. I know that's going to sound hilarious because I built it into my persona that I'm supposed to be arrogant. That's actually not the case, though. What I mean is, when I first got a gig, I was just a journalist in Counter-Strike, and one time a guy dropped out, BSL, who was going to do an IEM, and it just happened I was going to the event anyway, and Carmack was just like, could you just like fill in for this event and maybe do some games? And I was like, yeah, but I was thinking, mate, put me in there with fucking Joe Miller and Too Good. I'll tear this shit up. What are you talking about? And people will think, look, I was right. By the way, here's what's crazy, Quickshot. I wasn't totally wrong. I did show a bit of myself, but I actually wasn't as good as I thought it was. Look, I knew nothing about broadcast. I don't know technique, pauses. I'm probably doing shit like fucking talking over him and he's just letting me because I'm standing in or whatever. But in a weird fucking way, I sort of feel like it's why I understand why young players have to be cocky in a way. In a fucked up way, I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't have thought that Quickshot. If I'd have thought like, who am I? And that's Joe Miller. I don't think you'd never heard of me, mate. You know what I mean?
No, and the thing is, but I've done that my entire life.
Right.
I know what I'm good at. I know where my limits are, right? And I try my best to curate scenarios, whether I was competing, like when I was playing Battlefield 2, I had some of the best fucking game in South African Battlefield 2 because I was playing against middle-aged men. So I would play all of the upfront fucking infantry classes and I could outshoot anybody because I was literally a third of their age. When I moved to Call of Duty and all of a sudden there was younger kids that had better aim than me, I realized I could swap to the AK, I could call, and I could get into the heads of people, right? So I played to my strengths. I've always known I would be good as a speaker. I have felt like I'm a good conversationalist salesperson. I feel like I can get people to listen to me, but I also feel like I can get under people's skin. And crucially, I know how or why I'm doing it, right? So I've always known I was going to be belong about broadcast, but I also know I'm thick as shit in some areas. And there are some areas that I'm just stronger than others. So that was a big part of my focus, like from joining and from moving forward. It's like, okay, Riot had put me in this color casting position for 2013 and 2014. I know I'm not going to get the fans on my side. I know I'm not going to do anything. So like, I was fucking doing color commentary in Europe while Kobe and Jat were doing color commentary in NA. And I'm sorry, but like, we're not playing the same game.
Yes,
right?
sure.
So what I knew was, in order for me not only to keep my job, I also need to make sure that I can get into the position that I need to, which finally happened in 2015. More importantly, I need to be able to be a value add, more valuable behind the scenes. And in some weird ways, when I, was talking to my wife and I was thinking about prep for this specific conversation, I look back at those 2 years and I'm like, hey, actually being in that position where I was a joke, my content was not great. I was the jester, while other people were doing analysis. I was very fortunate that the game and the scene, everything was so much smaller because I wouldn't have got away with that nowadays. I wouldn't have got away with that 5 years ago. But what I did do, and I invested so much of my time and my growth was learning the company, learning the intricacies of broadcast, learning the craft by literally watching, studying. I was, full time. I got to travel to all over the world in 2013 and 14. I got to work with so many people who were former pros and see different play-by-plays. And there was a lot of development. So I also got this free pass of 2 years of broadcast experience where all of my bosses, all of my managers, all of the community were like, this guy's pretty shit. But you know what, he's kind of nice and it's okay. So that by 2015, when I finally got to do the thing that I'm good at, well, I've had one of the greatest head starts you could possibly have. And it was then like an underdog to hero story, So I got quite lucky when I think about it. Because again, I don't think I would have been on broadcast for 6 months with that level if it was happening now.
The first game I ever did as a commentator in Counter-Strike was with Joe Miller. It's the aforementioned story. Yeah. And I have to say, I was like you, Quickshot. As a journalist, etc., I was watching all the tournaments. I watched the Painkiller World Tour, etc., which if people don't know, is where Joe Miller became Joe Miller. Like, because he was basically some, I think he was 16 or something mad. He was just like some prodigy. He was like some fake guy that you see him immediately. You're like, holy shit, he's going to be it, mate. So when I did my first game, but the key thing, here's a little tip for you as well if you get in the industry. What I did is I didn't go play, oh my God, it's Joe Miller. Oh, fuck, I hope I'm going to do a good job. What I did is I went and talked to him and I was like, I heard that fucking accent and I was like, it's like some fucking kid from Sheffield, mate. Like, it's like one of the fucking Arctic Monkeys or something. I was like, this is okay. We're going to be okay. What's it like though? Because as you say, even in League, they were already the top ones. They were like the Artosis and Tasteless. But if you know past games, Joe Miller and Deman are like, they're on another strat. That's like Mount Olympus shit, man. What was it like to work with these guys?
Fucking insane. I mean, I'm the same as you entirely in that I've never treated anybody that I've met in the industry as some sort of superstar, crazy, I don't fanboy. I pay respects where respects are due, right? Get Right is a player that I've watched for a fuckload of time. And the very first time I got to meet him, I pay respects. Hey, listen, I watched these tournaments. I met Joe and Deman and could very clearly explain to both of them where I had seen Joe and Tosspot doing 1v1 commentary for Painkiller, a little bit of Quake. When I got to meet Deman, I remember making fun of him for doing Supreme Commander commentary after Call of Duty. And that was something that stuck out in his head because not only did I know I was doing, I gave him shit for it because he was so proud of it. He loved it.
Right.
And I was just like, mate, how can you play this shit fucking game? Like of all the strategy games. And I think it helped a lot. I'm also very fond of the time that the 2 years in Cologne with Joe, spent a lot of time off off air and outside the studio with him, we got to bond and got to chat quite a lot. The relationship deteriorated once we moved to Berlin and moved away from everything. But it was really cool to be able to learn and to watch. I do have to say, though, that at every single turn, at every single opportunity, I saw this really, really lame Reddit motivational poster that just stuck with me. It's so lame. It's so lame. It is a black and white picture of the final four from Pokemon, and it says, work until your idols become your rivals and beat them. And I remember seeing that as like a 25-year-old, 26-year-old and thinking, Joe, Deman, you're my master four. And it's something that I've never thought of negatively. I've never thought of it. It's not something that I'm like, it wasn't bitterness. It was like, hey, you guys set the bar. You guys like are some of the motivating factors for why I'm here. And I looked at you guys and went, hey, what can I do better? But that's the way I think about it. And I think at least in League of Legends, I feel like I accomplished that. But I will have that memory seared into my head. Fucking Pokemon, Joe and T-Man.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back. And supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, The Concept, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Ben Glass, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.